All right, we're only a few days away from the 2023 NBA draft. Thought I'd go through how I view the top prospects in this draft, get off a few takes, because I think it's one of the more anticipated drafts in a while. Um, Obviously, with Victor Wembanyama at the top, one of the more hyped up prospects in a really long time. So I'm going to go through how I see the top prospects, a few sleepers I got, just drop off a few takes. So I guess we'll just hop right into it. And right at the top, Victor Wembanyama. There have been people that, Woj, I believe, during the draft lottery called him the greatest prospect in the history of team sports. A lot of people say, I'd say the consensus is that he's the best prospect since LeBron. And obviously is an incredibly unique player, 7'4", moves like a guard, has the defensive potential to be one of the best in the league, and the offensive potential to be a player that the NBA really hasn't seen before. And he's just a very, very unique player because he does things that the NBA really hasn't seen a 7'4" guy be able to do. Um, And while obviously, looking at my list, think he is the number one prospect in this class, and if I'm the Spurs, I don't even think about it twice. I just don't get on board that he's like the greatest prospect since like sliced bread. Like I think his unique ability makes people be so intrigued because they've never seen anything like it. But I think that's also a little bit why I guess I don't know if he's like people are writing him in the Hall of Fame already. They're like he'll be one of the best basketball players ever. I just don't know about that yet. He played in France's top league, which is a good league. Um, but when you look at a guy like Luka Doncic, for example, I think Luka Doncic accomplished more than Wembanyama has at his age. Luka played for Real Madrid in the Euro League, the second best basketball league in the world, I think, by a pretty wide margin. He was playing against grown men constantly. Also, Wembanyama has, but um, and Luka was the MVP of that league, won it all. Wembanyama's done the same, but he's playing in French league. It's like comparing the Big South to the uh, Big Ten conference in college basketball. I think it's a little bit different. They're playing the same sport and they're playing against this. Not, I don't think they're playing against the same skill level, and I think that has to do have something about it. We've seen Wembanyama when he competes against his own age in the FIBA tournament when he was with France, playing against that team with Chet Holmgren, Jaden Ivey. He did terrific, and again, that's why I think he should be the number one prospect. But people are acting like he has no red flags. A major red flag that he's 7'4", and not many guys 7'4" stay healthy for a long time. And I think in scouting him, that should be something you realize because you can't control injuries. Statistically, taller NBA players get injured more than shorter NBA players. And I mean, his skill level, he does things that people haven't never seen before, and he should be the number one prospect. But all I'm saying is, I would almost be happier having the second pick in this draft because the first pick you have to take Wembanyama. If you don't, and he becomes the greatest thing since sliced bread, you look like an idiot. The second pick you can take Scoot Henderson, who I think might because he doesn't have that injury potential. It's such a unique thing because it's like you almost know an injury's coming with Wembanyama. It was kind of like Chet Holmgren last year. It's kind of like with Bull when he was coming out. It just you see it with all these prospects, with Yao Ming, with Bill Walton. Like Kareem was able to avoid a lot of injuries, but that also was a long time ago. The game wasn't as fast as it is now. It just every time one of these super tall guys, Kristaps, that come out, they all get hurt. And it's an interesting thing. I think he, like I said, I think he should be the number one prospect in this class, but I am not behind the fact that he's already in the Hall of Fame, like some people are saying. Obviously, that's a bit of a hyperbole, but I think he still has a lot of stuff to prove. People are acting like he's already proven that he's the greatest prospect ever. He didn't play at the highest level. Uh, and a prospect like Luka Doncic in the past played at the highest. He played in a league that's tougher than NCAA. Looking back, I still believe I don't understand why he did not. Luka Doncic did not go number one overall. And I've been ranking NBA draft prospects probably since I was in like sixth, seventh grade, but I was just making lists for myself, and now I like to publish them a little bit more. Now that I have a little bit of a following. And if I had a grade, I would have graded Luka Doncic higher than I would Victor Wembanyama for the fact that he proved how good he can be, I think. And it just Wembanyama also, I'm not saying he hasn't proved it, but it just again uh you're comparing apples to apples. All these guys are elite prospects. Wembanyama should be viewed as one of the best prospects ever, but he's not the best, is all I'm saying. And I have a few questions. His durability, um, his 3-point shooting. He shot below 30% last year, something that can improve. Um, is he going to be able to do it consistently? He showed it. He dropped 30, 40 plus in those showcase games against the G League Ignite. But again, that's against a bunch of 20-year-olds and teenagers. And it just, I have more questions than the general public does. I still would take Victor Wembanyama first, but I just don't think he is as but he's like a home run prospect. I'm trying to figure out how to say this, and he's just a very unique proposition. And I'll be very fascinated to watch his NBA career. At number two, I do have Scoot Henderson. I think I have him pretty sizably above Brandon Miller. It's just you watch him play, he reminds me so much of Anthony Edwards, the way he plays, that he plays like a football player playing basketball with just that downhill style. He's built like a running back. You could throw him on the football field and he'd be pretty successful. Um, his shot still has ways to go, a lot like Anthony Edwards did when he was in college. But I love the tenacity he plays with, the physicality. He's obviously a little shorter than Anthony Edwards. And Scoot's more of a true like combo guard. He'll play a lot with the ball. Um, a lot of comparisons to Derrick Rose. It just like I think he. It's just it would be naive to not realize that he'd probably be more durable than Victor Wembanyama. I think that has to factor into the equation. I really like him as a prospect. If I'm the Hornets, I take him number two, no questions asked. I think looking back on it, if they try to get cute and take Brandon Miller, just because they already have a lot of guards, a lot of, I guess, like LaMelo and Terry Rozier, like where would Scoot fit into that? I think in the NBA, when you're drafting at the top and you're drafting for need, that's when you get in trouble. Like the Sacramento Kings when they took Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic just because they already had De'Aaron Fox. That was a pretty goofy decision. Still one of the oddest decisions I think I have ever seen it in an NBA draft in recent memory. Because again, their GM was Vlade Divac, European great. Wouldn't he have enough connected people in the EuroLeague to be like, hey, this Luka guy's pretty good? But that's besides the fact. Going out on a bit of a tangent, but I think the Hornets got to take Scoot Henderson number two. Just move on with it. Figure out where he fits later. If you like him more than LaMelo, maybe you move LaMelo. I think him and LaMelo could play together, honestly. I think it could be pretty unique combination, but I think they should just go for it and figure it out later. And then at number three, I have Brandon Miller. This is obviously a top three that I think most people have. Um, and what I've learned, I guess, in the past 4 or 5 years that I've tried to make my list of draft prospects, there's sometimes you shouldn't overthink it. And I think these guys are pretty clearly the top three. I have them one, two, three, like pretty clearly. They're all close, but I think it's just a clear one, two, three. Brandon Miller obviously had a lot of off the court issues. Um, but he was great with Alabama. I remember that Gonzaga game last year. Uh, I was it was early in the season. It was like it wasn't at Gonzaga's arena. All these college games now are an off-site, neutral site stadiums, but it was in Spokane, I think, and he had 30 some points, and he's just a natural scorer, got a natural feel for the game. Obviously, as a Joe Schmo sitting in his bedroom, I'm not able to talk with these guys, and I don't know how he handled all the off the court stuff he dealt with last year. But being able to still be a productive player with all that stuff going on tells me that you have a lot of mental strength. I don't know how much. I'm not going to speak on his mental judgment necessarily, but you at least are able to flip the switch on and off when you get on the court and just focus on basketball. And I'm judging him as a basketball player, and I think he's really dang good basketball player. And I would take him number three personally. If I were the Trailblazers, a lot of chatter with if they're trading that pick, but I think he's a number three prospect in this class. I think he has a pretty high floor. Um, I don't think he is as high necessarily of a ceiling as Scoot and Wembanyama. I think he has all-star potential. I just don't know if he has all NBA potential like both of them. Could kind of have. I don't want to compare him to Zach LaVine as a basketball player, but like a similar career where he sniffs a few all-star games, top 20 player. But I just don't know if he's ever going to be that top 15 guy, that number one option on a winning team. Um, But like I just don't see how he's not at least 15 point per game guy in the NBA. So I still see him as number three. And then I see the next prospects in the tier. As you can see this line I have, I kind of tiered them, tried to at least. And this is where I think the draft becomes interesting because it's a lot more variability and variance. Um, and I think that kind of starts with the Thompson twins from Overtime Elite. They're two of the more, again, I think unique prospects in a while because they played in a upstart Gen Z social media basketball league before coming to the NBA. And we're going to figure out if that impacts your development or it keeps it on the same track, might have just slowed it down a little bit. It'll be really interesting to see because they're two guys. Something I've struggled with judging NBA prospects in recent years. Uh, the inefficient, super athletic uh, wing slash combo guards that were highly touted high school prospects that were just inefficient at the level they played after high school. Because it's just Asar Thompson, Amen Thompson, Anthony Black and Nick Smith, I think, kind of all fall in the same tier of are you going to be like Emmanuel Mudiay or are you going to be like Tyrese Maxey? Or because both of those players I kind of viewed in the same light when they came out. Like Emmanuel Mudiay, I remember played overseas and forgot he didn't go to college and he had all this hype. Like everyone's like, oh, he's going to be the next John Wall. He's super athletic, blah blah blah, and it just didn't work out in the NBA. Tyrese Maxey was kind of the same way. He fell into the 20s, but he was a bit shorter, not necessarily similar players like this. He's only like 6'3", 6'4", but it just he was really inefficient at Kentucky. He had up and down games, and then you even look more recently. Anthony Edwards, super inefficient at Georgia, a lot of up and down games. Not a great shooter in college And like none of these guys were great shooters at the next level. But I see Asor Thompson as the fourth best prospect in this class. Very comparable to like a Jalen Brown type. That's what everyone I think is comparing him and his brother to. His brother's more of an on-ball player, and Asor plays, I think, off the ball a little bit more. I'll be honest with you, I didn't watch him play that much because I'm not watching the overtime elite. Um, but I try to read a lot about them because I'm just very fascinated by why you would go that route if your ultimate goal is to make the NBA. It's just odd. It's basketball's in a weird spot with all this college stuff. College basketball is where in a great spot, I think, but it's just the NBA draft now is so weird because all these guys are coming from different leagues. And you look even 20 years ago, you get maybe a couple European players go in the first round, but there's no nobody coming from the G League Ignite, from overtime elite. You got I'll get to it, two guys in the lottery from the same random team in France. It's just a very unique year for the draft. Um, but basically I could see all four of these players, Asura Thompson, his brother, Amen Thompson, Anthony Black and Nick Smith, I think are you could convince me that any of those four are the best of the group. I think Anthony Black has shown the most consistency. He was a really good facilitator and playmaker, and probably the best shooter out of this group of four last year at Arkansas. Nick Smith Jr. was the number one prospect in the 2022 recruiting class. Before coming to Arkansas, dealt with a lot of injuries, signed with Clutch already. Everyone knows how Clutch Sports kind of secretly runs the NBA, but then he came back, showed his potential, struggled to kind of get back in a rhythm. But I'm not giving up on him yet. I think he has really high level shot creation ability, which is something not many guys have in the NBA. He reminds me the most out of Tyrese Maxey in this group of highly rated high school prospect that had an up and down freshman year, and a lot of people are souring on him just because he was so up and down. But they were just a few games you watch. You're like, this guy knows what he's doing. He's just dealing with a lot of injuries. He's dealing with being a teenager, uh, freshman at a SEC college, and I think it might take a little time, but I think you'll see that he just has shot creation ability that not many guys in this class I think have. He might be the fourth best shot creator right now, I think, in the whole class. He just can get to his spots. He has really good feel for the game. He just didn't shoot that well when he came back, and he's a good playmaker too. He can pass the ball. Anthony Black, I think, might have a little bit higher of a floor because he's, I think, a little bit better of a playmaker and facilitator. Asur Thompson has the highest ceiling out of this group, I think. Um, I think he's a better shooter than his brother Amen. Again, I'm just basing things on stuff I read. I'm not calling myself a elite NBA talent evaluator, all this stuff. I've never talked to him. I've just watched a few highlights of them playing. Both the Thompson twins, though, they are just similar players. Like I said, Amen's probably more of a facilitator and primary ball handler. At least he was with Overtime Elite. Nostro plays a little more off the ball, but they're both crazy athletes that struggled with shooting. But I think I'm kind of buying into both of them. I'd be fine if I was in the lottery taking them. Might be prospects that take a little bit to develop, um, like a Jalen Brown. I think a Jalen Brown's a very good comp for both guys, and I think they could have similar career trajectories. But that's kind of how I see it shake out. Like I said, you could talk me into either four of those guys being the fourth pick, but if I'm after that top three, these are the guys that I'm looking at, because I think they do things that people in the next tier that I'll get to just can't do. The combination of shot creation, facilitating, and athleticism. And I think we watched in the NBA playoffs the top players, the Jamal Murrays, the Jimmy Butlers, and even in the conference finals, when you got Guys like Jason Tatum, like Jalen Brown. You got LeBron James, Austin Reeves. All those guys can create shots on their own, and I think these four can do it the best outside of the top three. So that's why I see them in the next four. At number eight, I have Grady Dick. I'll go a little bit quicker now as the lower we get down. I just he's the best shooter in this draft. Shooting wins in the NBA. I think he could have a role on a team next year, a sizable role. Very good athlete. I think he can defend pretty well too. Um, and the way he looks, I think a lot of people are going to compare him to a JJ Redick, to a Kyle Korver, but I think he's a better athlete than all those guys, which makes him a little more interesting. He's more like almost J.R. Smith, really, and it just I know he's going to be able to contribute on an NBA team. So if I get outside of these top seven guys, I think he has one of the highest floors left. And I think an underrated ceiling, to be honest, because of that athleticism. And so I see him at 8, 9. Cam Whitmore, another guy. A lot of people are hyping up, could slip into that top five ish. One of the younger players in the draft, which is, I think, important when you're looking at prospects. Um, and it just he showed. I'm just kind of up and down on him. I don't really love him as a prospect, but I don't hate him. He showed his potential in a few games. Dealt with injuries at Villanova last year. Still such a young player. Um, and it's just at 6'7", he's not a great ball handler, not a great facilitator. Kind of plays like the 3 or 4, but in the NBA now, if you're 6'7" playing the 4, he's athletic enough to defend, but I don't know if he'll be offensively gifted enough that. Yeah, it just I would like him in this range if I was picking, but not a prospect I love, to be honest. His age I think helps him out a lot because he's uh a whole year younger than the Thompson twins, almost a whole year younger than Wembanyama, and over a year younger than Brandon Miller. So it's just that extra year of development is something like maybe he'll get it. Maybe if he stayed in college, he'd be as good as these prospects, but he didn't. So um, you don't know how he's going to develop next year. And I think he still has a lot of room to, and he just showed those flashes. So that's why I have him at 9. At 10, super interesting prospect, Bilal Coulibaly, who was on Victor Wembanyama's team. And he's a pre-draft guy. I keep reading about that. He's really helped himself out. And he showed flashes on the same team as Wembanyama. He had a few 30-point games last year, and like they won their or did I don't know if they won their championship in their league, but they're obviously one of the better teams. And I think he's just really high ceiling prospect. What the same age as Cam Whitmore, like I said. Another one of those just off ball wings. I think he's a pretty good shooter. Um, really long wingspan too, and I just if I'm picking in this range, I would take a long hard look at him, and I like him as prospect. Chris Murray, the oldest guy on this list so far. I just again very high ceiling in my opinion. I think his only weakness is his age. Um, really was almost just as good as his brother was last year, this year. Just an extra year under his belt. And it's just I could just see him contributing, being a fifth starter, a rotation guy just tomorrow in the NBA. And I think sometimes in the NBA draft, people reach for potential a little too much, and that's when you see guys like a Christian Brown slip through the cracks and be a rotation guy in the NBA on a championship team. And I just think Chris Murray does everything pretty well, and that's a guy that I would want. Kind of again, I see all these guys in the same group, like Jarris Walker, very similar player to Chris Murray, and he's 3 years younger than him. Um, and he has a higher potential than Chris Murray, but I just don't know if he's as good of a shooter as Chris Murray. And it's just in this range, it's like you're just is a guy going to be Isaac Okoro or is he going to be Kawhi Leonard? Um, what I mean by that is all these guys have that 3 and D potential where they're probably better defenders than offensive players. Well, at least for Walker, Murray and Hendricks are probably better offensive players, but it's just is their offensive game going to keep developing with their defensive game? Because all these guys are really good athletes that are going to be able to defend in the NBA. Or is it going to develop like Kawhi, or is it going to be stagnant like Isaac Okoro was? But this kind of how I see these three. I really see as very similar players. Um, Murray, like I said, I think the highest floor. Walker, highest ceiling, and Hendricks is interesting because he was also a freshman, but he played in the same conference as Walker, but UCF had a little bit of an easier schedule. Um, and yeah, that's how I see these three shaking out. It very just interesting draft again. Just an interesting year for the draft. At 14, I have one of my favorite prospects in this class, Brandon Podziemski from Santa Clara. If Grady Dick's the best shooter, Podziemski is the second best in this class. He had a few games last year in the WCC where he was just money from behind the 3-point line. Great shooter, still pretty young. Um, Underrated athlete too. And he's I think more a little more comparable to a JJ Redick, to a Kyle Korver, to Christian Brown, maybe to kind of the spot up guys that can be your fifth starter, and if they're open, they're going to knock down a three. Might be not be a lead on the defensive end, but we've seen those guys have a spot in the NBA. And Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, all those guys. And I think he could be another guy like that. I don't know if he'll find himself in the lottery, but he could be a lot like his Santa Clara teammate, Jalen Williams was last year. Guy that not many people talk about leading up, might go a little bit higher than people think, and then off season next year to look and be like, oh, he was all rookie. So I like him. I think he's fun prospect, and if I was any team drafting in the late lottery to the 20s, I would look at him. At 15, I have Cason Wallace. Another one of those high level prospects, showed potential last year. Good two-way player. Shot creation is something I don't know if he's as good as, a little bit ways to go there. But I still think he's a lottery level talent. And then Leonard Miller, another really interesting guy, one of the more productive G League Ignite draft prospects in like ever. He was really good last season for that team. 6'10", versatile wing, he kind of just do it all. Um, he stretched the floor. Still pretty young. He almost came out of high school last year. Um, but he's a high potential, I think low floor guy a little bit. Um, and it's just in this range. If you're looking for potential or instant contributor, he's the potential guy I would look at. And I would be comfortable taking him in the lottery. That's kind of like 8 through 16 here are guys would be comfortable taking in the lottery if I was a GM. 4 through 7 are guys that I kind of think have a chance. They're like the last really high potential guys that could be like your like all-star number 1, 2 options, and then the top three are the blue chip guys. At least in my opinion, that's kind of how this class looks. And then the rest of the first round, these are I'd say 17 through 25 are guys that I would be very happy with taking in the first round. Jalen Hood-Schifino from Indiana, he was one of my favorite college players last year. Great shot creator. Just I don't know if he's going to be good defensively enough. Kind of sneaky, reminds me of Jamal Murray a little bit. Um, I've kind of went back and forth on him the whole. Just a really interesting guy. Kind of old for his grade. He's already going to be 20. But I like him. I still I think would be comfortable taking him in the lottery. But if I drafting in this range, I would really like him as a player. Derek Lively, another guy who was at one point the number one high school player. Really up and down season, but I think he'd be a really good defender. Can kind of fill that Robert Williams kind of role. I could see him having a similar career of a guy who can catch lobs, can defend. Was showing his range a little bit with from three. Really good shot blocker though. I remember that first UNC game, he had like 8 blocks. So he's a guy again that I could sneak into the lottery that I think would be a fun prospect. And then at 19, I have GG Jackson, who is the youngest player in the draft. Another guy, him, Lively, and Nick Smith were kind of all the number one prospect in the class sometimes. I remember it changed a lot. And then Jackson originally committed to UNC, flipped to his hometown of South Carolina. Another very up and down season. Interesting player. He kind of was their primary ball handler at 6'9", but he showed flashes. Another guy that I should kind of say, honestly, I should like, yeah, I think I'd include these three guys in the tier above now that I'm talking about it out loud. Um, well, yeah, I think he could be a lottery pick. He could be one of the bigger sleepers in this class because he is still so young. Showed his potential in some games last year. Um, but again, it's a consistency thing. He's a high potential, I think, low floor type guy. And in the NBA, that's sometimes what people are looking for. Excuse me. And then at 20, I got Amari Bailey. Yeah, these would be guys that I don't think I would take in the lottery, but I would love to take right outside the lottery. So yeah, I'm glad I switched that a little bit. But I saw Amari Bailey play for Sierra Canyon when he was in high school at the Target Center against Minnehaha. Terrific shot creator. Really showed it last year in a handful of games that he can do it at the college level. Um, and if you're right outside the lottery, I think he's a great player. Kind of learned how to play defense for a coach like Mick Cronin, and he could be a sneaky player in this draft. That's rotation guy, I think, pretty early. And yeah, and then next pick I got Jordan Hawkins, another great shooter, already pretty old at 21. Um, but he was one of the best players of college basketball last year, led UConn to a national championship. It's just I don't think he has the playmaking ability of a few other of these guys. Um, Terrific shooter, but I that's why I might be a little lower on him than some. I just don't know how much better he can get. Um, he's just I think a really good shooter, and I think he'll have a spot in NBA. So that's why I still see him as a fringe lottery guy. But everyone above him, I just like more. Is really what it just comes down to. I like Hawkins a lot, but and then right after I got Andre Jackson, very unique player. Kind of played the Ben Simmons role for UConn last year. Can't really shoot worth a lick right now, but terrific facilitator, terrific defender, terrific rebounder, and he might have been UConn's most valuable player last year because I think without him, they would have been a lot different of a team. And if he can improve his shot, I think he's going to be really good. But a player like Christian Brown contributing for the Nuggets this year, I think he could do a similar team for thing for a team next year. The shooting is an issue, but he just knows how to make the right play, which is very valuable in the NBA. At 23, I have Jaime Jaquez, who he is a bit younger than Chris Murray. I would not have guessed that, but um, veteran guy who I think is a really underrated defender, kind of like Andre Jackson. He always makes the right decision. He's not a great athlete. Bit of a tweener. You don't really know what position you're going to play him at. But kind of like how the Heat have been doing with like a Caleb Martin, like a Duncan Robinson, all these guys. I don't think Hawkes will go in the first round, but he's a guy that I just could envision just playing in a playoff series. He just knows what he's doing on the basketball court. He doesn't make the wrong decision a lot of times. He's a good rebounder. He's just a grinder. I just could see him playing in the NBA. I just like him as an NBA player. Don't really know why, but it just at this point of the draft, if I was like a team like the Warriors or something, I'd be like, you kind of need another guy like that. Not all the time. I think at the end of the first round, you're not shooting for the stars all the time. If you can get a rotational player, that's a win. And I think Hawkes can be that. Noah Clowney, one of the more athletic guys in this draft, just a classic stretch big that he can block shots, he can catch lobs, and he can run the floor. And it's very valuable. I think he could Mitchell Robinson type a little bit. Still only 19. Like I said, I think he could just be a rotational player. And at this point in the draft, that's sometimes all you need. Olivier Maxence Prosper, one of the coolest names in the draft. Guy who improved a lot last year. And he can be that 3 and D role very well. And that's why I got him at this level. And then the next I guess chunk here are guys that I wouldn't be shocked that went in the first round, but they're guys that I guess I just got a question about. They just don't really sit right with me. You got Keontae George from Baylor, a bit undersized, not a great defender, but he was a good shot creator last year. Not a great facilitator either. Kind of a lot similar to Jett Howard, who's just a little bit taller. See them as very similar prospects. Ryan Rupert from the New Zealand Breakers, guy I've never watched play basketball, I will admit. Um, but the stuff that I read about him, I think he's has the potential to be a really good shooter. Still pretty young. The New Zealand Breakers had a couple guys come in the NBA recently. RJ Hampton played for them. LaMelo obviously played in that league. Josh Giddey played in that league, so it's a good league. And it just at this point in the draft, you'd be a guy I would look at. And if I had a better scouting department, I could figure out how much I like him. But I from what I've read about him and the highlights I've watched, I just think he has the potential to be a rotation guy, as someone I'd look at this point in the draft. Colby Jones, another one of those combo guards, op-ball wings that showed flashes last year. Oscar Shibwe, really interesting guys, 6'9". It just I could see him having a role in the NBA, just being it, it's because he's so used to playing with a high usage rate, all the stuff. But just he's a great rebounder, and if he can realize what his role would be in the NBA, if he'd go on a team like the Heat, he could be like a backup to Bam Adebayo and play the exact same way. Not as well, but he can play that style of basketball, I think, in the NBA. Then you got Jordan Walsh, interesting 3 and D guy, versatile glue guy. Jalen Clark fits that role. Kobe Buffkin, Marcus Sasser, Bryce Sensabaugh, they kind of all Sasser's obviously the eldest, but Buffkin and Sensabaugh, both young, showed flashes at times last year, great shooters. But again, it's just there's so many of these guys like the Buffkin, Keontae George, Jett Howard, Bryce Sensabaugh, like those four. I just don't. I've struggled with separating them because they all kind of are like the same for me. But yeah, that's kind of why I have them here. Dariq Whitehead, another highly rated guy, and Julian Phillips, two guys that are high potential, but they just didn't really show it much last year, so that's why I kind of have them lower on them than some. Keontae Johnson, very interesting guy. He's old. All the injuries and heart problems he's dealt with has been extraordinary that he's been able to come back. But it just, I still think he's a really talented player. I wouldn't take him in the first round due to his health issues, but second round, are meant to be dart throws, so I would love him in the second round for any team. Trace Jackson Davis shows he can play basketball. Don't know what position he's going to play in the NBA. Not a great shooter, but in the second round, I would still like him. Amani Bates, this dude could be in 1,000 different places next week, but he's still one of the most talented players in this draft, and I still think he's worth the second rounder. I wouldn't take him in the first round. I like enough of these guys more than him, but yeah, that's I guess all I gotta say on him. James Najee, another one of those rim running bigs. And yeah, like I said though, you fit in the rotation. Those guys have a role in the NBA, even if they can't shoot, even if they can't hit free throws. Terquavion Smith, another guy who surprised people coming back, fits kind of in that the like I was saying, the Buffkin, George, Howard, Sensabaugh role where they're all just kind of the same player to me. Yeah, and then the rest of these guys are kind of guys that I guess I think should be second rounders, but obviously have a characteristic that's not making them. Dama Sanogo, I like. Marquise Noel, I think should be a second rounder, even though he's super short. I just love his mentality, and if I was picking in the 50s, I would give him a dart throw. Um, and who knows, maybe he'll have a Nate Robinson type career. Azuolas Tubelis, another guy who produced very well in college, but I just don't know if he's going to be able to defend in the NBA. Drew Timmy, I don't know if he's going to be able to defend in the NBA. But yeah, I mean, the second round is honestly a little one of the weaker second rounds I think there's been in a while because I mean a lot of these guys I just don't think are going to be in the NBA very long. But yeah, that is my top 60 NBA draft prospects. I always like just doing this to look back at 5 years from now, see how wrong I was. I don't think I'm very good at this. There's been a few guys that I've been right on, and I've been right on Luka Doncic, and he's might be one of my favorite players in the NBA right now. I just love watching him play. But I like to see how wrong I am sometimes also. So this is just kind of my thoughts on the draft. I always love the NBA and the NFL draft. Love the drama. Love seeing how everything shakes out. And yeah, I appreciate you listening. Row the boat, Sky Umont, and go Gophers.